would happen is that the whoever is the person elected to keep the minutes for each individual committee would receive training on and be on the Zoom account, so they could initiate their own Zoom meetings. They could run the OWL camera, essentially, so that each committee could act standalone without needing, anyone from the village in particular to attend. So in a perfect world, it would be somebody who is local enough to make most of the meetings, so that if their absence it would be rare, but if it did happen, the meeting responsibilities would fall to somebody else. But beyond that, there are no other requirements.
Okay. And so is there, just a quick question before we go further, is there a specific laptop that we need to use, or is there's expectation that person would use their personal laptop?
There is not a specific laptop at this time. I will apologize. I actually stole BJ's laptop last week in order to get access to my email. We have ordered 4 new laptops, so the hope is we will have some spares here fairly soon, but in the interim, we don't. So for now, paper minutes or somebody who wants to use their personal device until we can get all of our IT sorted out on our end.
Okay. Okay. So does anybody have a burning desire to take minutes? Okay. You will? Oh, great. Okay.
Sure.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's a skill.
So now do we have to? Yeah.
So we need to make a motion to nominate
Quinn.
Meg Quinn as our note keeping and meeting running person, whatever the name of that. So we'll come up with something official.
I'll motion. I will second.
Yeah. All right. Then we'll vote. Robbie? I'm sorry, Josh.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Okay.
Maya?
Okay.
Aye.
And usually I would think the title is secretary.
I
Okay,
would
all right,
think so.
perfect.
That's usually what it is.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Angel Fire contract to purchase existing apartment land and commercial space. And I think, Jake, you were going to have some information related to that to share. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I will apologize. Obviously, I created this agenda. In the future, that will not be the case.
Okay.
You all, as the committee, through your chair, which, forgive me, I must have missed it. Who is actually going to be the chair and the person keeping the minutes?
Elizabeth's going to be the chair.
Okay.
Meg is going to be the secretary.
Fantastic. Okay. So in the future, the agenda would actually be put together by the chair. All of you would have input to the chair to do that. So I put this one together because of an opportunity the village is going to be talking about. For those of you who have seen tomorrow's council agenda item, there is an executive session related to this. Because this is an open real estate transaction, I can't actually give you the details of the where, but there is a land purchase in the works that includes some existing structures and more than 5 acres of developable, that's not a word, of dirt that is available to be developed. That contract, we hope, is going to get initiated at tomorrow night's council meeting. Okay. Because of that, if you look at the agenda, you will see there are several things that flow from this. But the overarching theme here is it is the mayor and council's intention to do many things that are necessary to try to get workforce housing on this piece of property as quickly as possible. There may be some renovation work to the existing building that needs to be done to get a certificate of occupancy on it. And we're also looking at several options we'd like to have you all discuss from a development perspective with how to build out the rest of the property. Those could be things like modular construction. They could be tiny homes. They could be larger scale, high density apartment buildings. But because this is going to happen relatively quickly, it kind of jumps us on to the need to talk about the rest of the agenda items that are on here. And so I won't step on my own agenda items kind of coming up here, but are there any questions, I guess, at this point related to that land deal before we get into the next agenda items are all next steps for the committee from a governance perspective?
So Jake, can you at least tell us if that land is off the resort?
The land is not within the resort boundary.
And you said there's an executive session. Is that, what is that as part of the regular council meeting, or is it before or after?
It is part of the regular council meeting, and as it was explained to me, when you're doing contracts of this nature, when a municipality is looking to buy land, those things are allowed to be done in executive session, because the intention here is not for the village to get into a bidding war with somebody else, in other words. So there may be, I don't have the tomorrow's agenda pulled up in front of me, there may be some personnel matters also wrapped into the executive session at tomorrow's meetings, but all of that is at tomorrow's council meeting.
Executive session is or is not open to the public?
The executive sessions are not open to the public. So how that happens is it will be during the course of the council meeting. The mayor, council, and some other personnel will adjourn to a separate room there at Village Hall, have what should be a hopefully short executive session, and then resume the open session.
Okay, good deal. Okay. So I think it's, and I don't know if we want to expand on that particular, I want to stick to the agenda, but I do think, when we get to the point of discussing the types of and the mix of what we want to do, we need to make sure we're not, steering people to just one choice, that there's going to be a variety of choices, rental, purchasing, all that kind of thing. So I don't know if that's going to be part of that discussion or not, or if that's a separate working session, but anyway.
So nothing about this purchase changes the things I talked about at the last Workforce Housing Committee. Ultimately, one of the items on here is we're going to need to talk about in engaging some studies for housing. I know there's been some emails flying around about that, as well as a planner. I would also encourage the committee that we are open to the possibility of some temporary housing solutions on this piece of property, that we are in such a need of housing units that we may be okay doing some temporary fixes there, even if it's not what we intend to stay on that property 5 or 10 years down the road. So I agree with everything that was just said, that all options for this piece of property should be considered, for sure. And again, as you'll see, the agenda items, the biggest thing I think that's going to put us in a hurry is we don't really want this committee to be the slowdown from the governance perspective. So let's pretend, and maybe we don't have units that can be occupied this calendar year, but maybe we do. But what we don't want to have is a situation where we have units that can be occupied, but we don't have the documents, the governance, the municipal code, all the things that other municipalities that are further down this road than we are have done the hard work of, because there are, the push here is going to be, at least in the short term, that these are workforce housing units, that we're housing, hopefully, a fire chief, a police officer, those types of things. So what the council is asking for the committee's help with is starting to either copy in other municipalities, whether it's Red River, Ruidoso, Taos. We're open to any and all suggestions there of, we need some bylaws, we need some governance documents on how we can go about putting workers in workforce housing sooner rather than later.
Okay. So speaking of, that is the next item on the agenda about the bylaws and governance documents. So I will say, some of the notes that I wrote down just to bring up at the meeting is get some examples from the other communities. And I don't know if that's Red River. I think the email that you sent today, Robbie, said that to work with one of the documents said work with the Housing Authority in Taos. So it would be a good example. The other document that you sent mentioned, and please feel free if you want to take over and discuss what they are, but I just wanted to make a couple of notes, a couple of things, bring up a couple of points. In the New Mexico Financing Authority document that Robbie sent, it mentions that we need to have a housing plan. And then once the housing plan is approved by the MFA, then we need to have an ordinance that the city council has to adopt. And it does say in that document that I read this document a month ago and I just scanned it today, that if the county has a housing plan, an affordable housing plan, that can be used, can be adopted by the municipality, and then, but we still have to have an ordinance. So I think, so, and my question was, we probably are not gonna come up with that in a 1 hour meeting like this. We're gonna have a work session specifically, dedicated to this particular topic. I think, Dawn, the documents that you had sent had quite a few good pieces of information in there as well to consider. So I just wanted to bring up, we need to move forward, but we need to have a work session, and, sooner than later is probably good. So anybody have thoughts on that, or?
The other thing I would suggest is most of the municipalities you just named probably have a committee that looks a lot like this one does now. That if we can copy some best practices between committee members or committee chairs, we really don't have time to reinvent the wheel here. So if we can steal 80% of somebody's plan and modify it with the 20% that we like better, I'm all for that. I would suggest, I know we have been in contact with the mayor of Ruidoso on some of our other committee businesses, that simply reaching out to that contact, if it's Taos, if it's, any other municipality in New Mexico, because they've navigated this exact problem, let's copy on their homework where we can.
So maybe one step prior to the work session is for someone on the committee to reach out. Doesn't have to be the same person, reach out to all three, but if we could get some documents from those folks, I think that'd be helpful. So if anybody wants to,
I
do you
think
have
it-
any context? Go
I
ahead.
think it would be good to have several of us reach out to different, instead of putting it all into
Sure.
one, especially if we want to move this quickly.
Sure.
The one thing I do feel like we need to discuss is I would rather I want us to utilize as many other municipalities as possible. I would rather we come up with a separate plan, a municipality plan for Angel Fire, and not be combined with Colfax County.
Okay.
Okay.
Just because,
We're-
let's face facts, we're the
Right.
bread for Colfax. So I don't want to get into a situation where we're forced to take a step back because the rest of the county, whatever.
Yeah.
Not saying it would be like that, but, so I would say maybe each of us take sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead, I'm good.
So we have a question from the audience, and what?
So Colfax County did do a housing study in 2020
Okay.
during COVID. I believe the village did adopt that. Jay Mitchell was the manager at the time. In that study, there's actually a segment for Angel Fire with recommendations for Angel Fire. So if you wanted to use that as a template to update, that's probably the easier lift for you to do.
Okay.
But they did break out Raton, Cimarron, Angel Fire. So there is a section just for this municipality that was kind of specific. And if, rather than trying to generate all this again, my recommendation is to at least start there.
Okay.
So is that something you have?
I do, and I can email it to the chair to get it out to everyone.
That'd be perfect.
Okay.
And I think I've got it condensed just for the Angel Fire portion, so it's, and you can get it.
Okay.
But it does identify trends here that are different from other parts of the county too. So.
Okay, so that's good. So that'd be good for everybody to read. And then in terms of reaching out, you mentioned Ruidoso, and we talked about Taos and Red River. Do we want to kind of just have each person, or, someone on the committee reach out to each one of them, especially if you know someone in that area, so we can get the Ruidoso name from BJ, right? Or,
Correct.
all right. And then What about, anybody have any contacts in Red River?
I can reach out to Linda County.
Okay, so, okay. So Robbie will be, yeah, but if they have a committee member, yes, I mean, yes, but I'll just double check with BJ on those conversations and what else, what it else.
So you're gonna take Ruidoso.
I can, yeah, I can. And what about Taos? Anybody want to reach out to Taos? Okay. What would you say?
Just a follow-up. So I actually met with Red River this afternoon. The director of tourism managed their workforce housing committee. They've selected a piece of property to develop for it.
Okay.
So when I met with him today, I said, could you copy us your surveys? And he did a survey to employers and to employees. We did one in 2021 through the chamber.
Yeah.
But we only got 7 people to respond to
Right.
it.
Well, that part was, it's one we tried to do it. I think Survey Monkey,
Yes.
and we only got 16 back, the whole thing.
16th being gracious.
And part of it was we didn't do it at the right time, because everybody's busy. The other part was, is a lot of folks that got the survey thought it was spam.
Okay,
The Word document that we had used several years previous. Was a lot easier if you time it for the off seasons so the employers can actually take the time to fill it out in a Word document. They start on something and then they got stuff to do something else. And then get back to the Word document and work on
I think we sent it out like first instant.
it.
But the last thing is, Taos and Espanola both have affordable housing ordinances.
Okay.
But I've got copies of this too, and I'll forward this to you.
okay,
I'm a little hesitant because it's not, it depends on your definition of workforce, but they've got an ordinance for affordable housing. But if we're looking for a template to start,
maybe
I
that's,
think,
okay,
I think this formatting is gonna be complicated.
okay. So let's get those documents and then you said. Okay, well, let's move to survey in just a second. Let's finish on this, on the governance documents. Yeah, 1 second, let me finish filling out this. So yeah, if we get the documents from Santos and we'll share those out, if you could review the one from Taos / Espanola, whatever it is, and then have some follow-up questions and maybe reach out to the person in Taos, that would be helpful. Okay,
And Santos, who is it at Red River that you were?
Max.
and then what about Taos?
Max, could you, I'll just show you this card.
Okay,
Okay.
and then you're gonna do Taos, right? So do you have the name?
I don't have a
Taos?
copy.
Okay, so we'll
No.
figure that.
Taos is the one that, Daniel. sent
Oh,
us.
okay, so we'll, okay, just.
It's
we'll
in
make
one,
sure you-
it's in one of the emails from today. What was her name? Just completely went blank.
Let me see,
Hold on, it's in my email.
okay,
Diane Bryan, I believe.
we'll make sure when we send something out to the committee, we'll include that name. Okay, so then
I'm sorry, Lisa O'Brien.
Lisa,
She's with the Taos Housing Partnership.
okay, so then, Don, did you have something specific to the bylaws and governance?
Well, I was gonna say that Red River is probably our best model.
Okay,
Taos is an economic hub for the entire region.
okay,
Ruidoso is 10 times as big as we are.
okay,
Red River has 448 citizens. We've got 1,200.
okay.
They're gonna be much better model for us.
Okay, all right, good. I think that's good. Good. Okay, the only other, and maybe we'll see this in those workhouse, in those bylaws, governance documents that they have. One of the things that I was reading is within our ordinance, if we are kind of doing housing that's specific to the workforce or specific to a certain socioeconomic category, that they typically put into the HOA or whatever you want to say, whatever it is that governs it, is that it's not that a developer can come in develop it, say they're doing it for workforce housing, and then as soon as it's completed, they sell it and take it out of that workforce housing pool. So that's just something that we also need to consider when we get into into that workforce, the discussion. So I guess the only thing I wanted to make sure is that we all agree that we need a work session once we get these examples. So maybe we get the examples and then we plan a work session from that. And then, need to be more than just an hour, probably a couple hours. But I do, back to Jake's point, I do want to make it quick because this is something, if other people spent a year on this, I, prefer if we didn't spend a year on it, if we can use best practices from others. I think that's a very good point, so.
And I would like to stress, like I did at our first committee meeting, we have to come up, and it's something we can do in a work session. We have to come up with a specific definition of what we're saying workforce is.
Right.
Because if we're gonna try to do socioeconomic, a fire chief who wants to move here is gonna be outside any kind of income guidelines.
Right.
So I just feel like we really, and hopefully the documents that we get from these various organizations are gonna kind of lead us in that direction.
So one thing we
If-
can do on that is, at the moment, as I understand from Jake, we have an opportunity for village employee workforce.
Mhm.
That, I think, is kind of a no-brainer, that's our remit at least. And then later we can decide if we want to expand it to affordable housing. Does that seem like a fair?
I want to be very careful that we separate this from affordable housing, because that's a whole different.
I guess that's my point, is that we know we're doing workforce.
What is workforce?
Right.
Exactly. We
Angel
have-
Fire, Village
Yeah.
employees.
So if I could interject,
$12 an hour.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
if I could interject one thing here, I think we're both at the same point. Obviously, if the village is going to get in the business of building housing, people working for the village should probably get first take. However, the next part is, I've heard from several council members, what we'd really like to prioritize is anyone who is going to work within the village of Angel Fire would kind of be that next rung. So the first rung on the ladder would be any village employee. The second rung on the ladder would be anyone working in the village of Angel Fire. And that definition could get out broader. I think you're going to have your hands full just building enough houses for those two buckets, at least for the next couple of 3 months. The third bucket of affordable housing gets into whole other requirements from state and federal authorities that I'm not saying we're never going to go down, but it's just not the thing that is most pressing on the council's mind right now.
Could I just ask clarification? What's the distinction between the second and the third bucket? I got the distinction between the first and the second.
So there's a couple of things. When you get into affordable housing, you get into this means tested, income based, subsidized housing, which I don't think we're necessarily opposed to long term, but short term, we have 77 village employees now with 9 open positions. And I don't think there's any way we're going to get that many units out of this first go round. If we were to then look at the next largest employers in town, I think the means testing and affordable is really what we need is a workforce. We don't necessarily need the subsidized housing for retirees or those types of things. I'm not mad at those people, but what the problem we're trying to solve is workers for the village, workers at the resort, workers at every other business in town that are so desperately, in need of a workforce. So there is a distinction there, but it's really a governmental distinction of which financing authority, which rules are you going to play by? And the workforce housing it's not that it has less rules, but it's the specific need that the council is trying to address.
You had something, Santos?
Yeah, along the same lines, I have prepared copies for all of you of different programs MFA does provide right now. But the one that's in the back is a PowerPoint from a developer that approached our office early February. And it's actually a new program from MFA. It's an ownership option. It's not a rental option. So if a developer came in to build 20 homes using this program, they would be deed restricted for 15 years so that it couldn't be flipped. But if the village participated in the program as well, let's say the village would extend water, sewer, pave out there. The village would be entitled to take a portion of those units and hold those for a teacher, a nurse, a fire personnel. And then it wouldn't count towards the village's debt limit, because at some time the village could sell those units on the market and the debt would be cleared. So there are some new programs, this one in particular, where the developer said, show me your pay stub, let me calculate 30%. So I know I can get you into this. So there's that scale. So like a fire chief, that 30% is going to be different from a maintenance worker. But there's an opportunity for them to get into a house that the village manages, and the village won't flip it as a short-term rental either. But at any rate, I also included, you probably got this from Don, the surveys that we attempted back in 21 and the cover letter with it. You can feel free to keep it or not. But the other programs, the one I did not include is the low-income housing tax credit, because again, I think the conversations you've had is you want more options on the spectrum for folks in the housing to fill into. And so this gives you at least an idea of what programs that the state's willing to help. And then the last one is a unique one because it's actually an ownership one. And so they were looking at, right now, townhome models townhouses is a model folks are trying to replicate, because you can get somebody a fee simple for unit 1, another one for unit 2. You can share the cost in that construction over 6 units. So that's different from just your traditional 3-story apartments. Think of that.
Yeah. So yeah, let's pick one of those up and then we can obviously read that ahead of making our work session, and thank
And
you.
I can also just email those to you if you
Okay.
prefer as well.
So something else too, that Jake had mentioned, we've got 77 village employees currently with 9 open positions. I think one of our priorities needs to be, we need to survey, like, how many of those are actually wanting housing.
Yeah, and that's the next topic of discussion. So we could go ahead and move on. We all agree that we need a working session
Yes.
for the bylaws and the governance documents, and we've got people who are going to get some documents, and then once we get those, we'll pull those together. And okay, so now on to the
Elizabeth,
yes, sorry.
should we go ahead and schedule the work session on our calendars now? And then that kind of gives us the
Sure.
pressure of, we have until here to get these documents.
Okay.
Cause I don't know if anybody else, but
Sure.
Yeah.
schedules fill up very quick.
Yeah, do it as.
So I think at our last meeting, we discussed having a committee meeting every couple of weeks, or at least meeting every couple of weeks, whether it's, so the next week in 2 weeks would be the last week of March. Does anybody have any, like, what if we met on
We actually have a committee meeting scheduled on the 25th.
25th?
If we want to change that to a work session.
That's not a bad idea. I think we'd want to, maybe a couple hours would be good enough. At least to review, to spend some time and review the documents and then try to put together. Okay,
Are we talking evening? Does evening work best for
yeah,
most?
So if I could interject just real quickly, I think having a work session is a great idea. The time, I assume the same rules that apply to council apply to subcommittees for work sessions. We have a work session scheduled for council for Thursday. The only thing I would caution is work sessions are intended where you're not supposed to have any motions or anything that gets voted on.
okay.
So as long as there's nothing, and there's a couple of more agenda items that we'll go through, but as long as you don't anticipate needing to vote on anything to send to council, that would be the only thing I'd caution you about for a work session.
Okay. So let's we can kind of get through maybe the rest of, and even maybe the city council meeting, the results of the city council meeting, and decide if we're gonna have to have something to vote on for that day. But if we can do it that day, and let's go through, does evening work best for you or daytime?
Evenings, but if for something like this, we need to get in and get it done during the
Okay.
day before the meeting so that we can do both.
Okay,
I can do that.
okay,
You know.
evening works good. Okay. So as of right now, turn that into a work session unless between today and tomorrow, we come up with something specific that we feel needs to be voted on. If we end up having to have something that needs to be voting on, we might then, and maybe we don't just limit to today and tomorrow, but if we feel like we're gonna have to have something that needs to be voted on, then I'll send out a note asking for a different day for the work session. Does that sound good?
Does it absolutely can't be on the same.
I mean, could be on the same day. Maybe we do the voting part first and then we end that and then we do the second can we do it that way, Jake?
Yes, so in fact, this Thursday is a good example of that. We have a 3 o'clock work session. Obviously, work sessions are open to the public just like regular meetings, but during a work session, it's meant to foster discussion, so there will be no motions. We then have a special council meeting Thursday evening, I believe, with just one item on the agenda. So you can do them the same day. That's not a problem. They just do need to be separate events with separate public notices.
Okay.
So a work session is open to the public?
Oh, yes, work sessions are all open to the public.
Okay.
As are meetings. The only thing that is not open to the public is an executive session.
Okay, sounds good.
So do we want to, for now, just schedule like 3 hours, 5:30 to 8:30 on the 25th?
That's fine. Or 5, is 5 bad for anybody? 5:30 is
Yeah,
preferred.
I'd rather do earlier than,
Oh, okay.
I mean, if it's gonna be
Is it-
3 hours, I'd rather start earlier.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, I mean, I'd be open to doing earlier. I mean, I have flexibility for that, so.
Same here, but I mean, we need to get this rules in line so we can move forward.
Meg, what
Yeah,
about you?
it's after the season, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about you? Good. So maybe like start at 4? Would that be better? Okay, all right. So let's do,
3 if that's easier for everybody.
yeah, fine. That's fine. That's fine. Okay, so 3 o'clock on the 25th, right?
And is this gonna be just a work session or are we going to continue, are we gonna have the?
I say for now, let's call it workforce/committee meeting.
Yeah.
And then this way, we start out with the
can-
priority that's a work session, but if it ends up being, we actually have to vote on something, we can switch it to a committee meeting.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. Okay, all right, so now moving on to the sourcing a study of housing needs. So we do have the Chamber of Commerce, I think everybody got a copy of the Chamber of Commerce survey that was done in 2021, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I think, and the way I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, the way I've read this is that this was really focused on sending out to employers and getting the employers to answer the survey kind of based on the information that they gather from their employees. And I do think there is value in doing that. Because there's gonna be some people who are not gonna be interested in answering a survey. I think at the last meeting, we talked about maybe this needs to be updated with current data. So I think part of the work session should be going through here and, seeing, are there any new questions that we need to add? Are there any that we maybe do not want to do? But my thought was that we should do a survey that we can send out to employers to get some information from them, and then also to individuals at some point, to individuals, so that because I'm not sure that the employer can tell us we need a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, pet friendly. I don't feel like that's the responsibility of the employer, but an employee who's interested can tell us, do I want a 1-bedroom as a studio? Fine. Am I going to be here all year round? That kind of thing. And then also, there's some people, like, I forget who just made the comment, but there are going to be people who commute into town that really don't want to live here. Maybe their family is more committed to, Eagle Nest or Springer or whatever, but they work here. So that's part of the aspect that I think we need to.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I can tell you, there's a couple that they're from Water area and 100, generations, families
Right.
back, they have no desire
Right,
to live in Angel Fire.
right,
Which I, get, but
right,
we still,
So-
we have to identify that.
right, exactly.
I
So-
think it should be honestly two separate surveys, one for
Yeah.
employer and one for
Right.
employees.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think the time has changed since our last survey. I feel like we can really get a social media push, a
Mhm.
door-to-door push to get these employers and employees, look, we need you to do this. And then we also need, I don't believe we can ask age anymore, but I don't know that for. a fact.
Yeah, I think we need to, and then the chamber is the one who conducted this with the employers. I think that's. I mean, I'm gonna ask somebody in the audience, John, I think you were part of this, right? You helped conduct this and,
Well, but, and, we ended up, 21 was the latest one, and 2 previous to that,
okay,
which were from different times and had a much bigger turnout.
Mhm.
But the chamber itself, what we need is the current registered business list for the village
okay,
with names, emails, stuff like that.
so we can, I'm
And
sorry.
the employers, if we do the study correctly, we can study the results of employment by sector. Construction, tourism, service, food and beverage, stuff like that, so we can see the breakdown,
Mhm.
in both the wages, because construction pays considerably more than the minimum
Sure.
for dollars.
The only thing about the chamber is that we had 157 contacts that we
Yeah.
could use at different businesses.
Mhm.
So if we use that as a base and maybe expand it to business licenses as well.
Yes,
Because not everybody's a member of the chamber, but 157 contacts was a really good start.
that's represented.
But I don't think we got 15. If we did.
So the village should have 100% of all
Correct.
businesses though.
Yes, they do. The clerk has that. Yes.
So, let's go back to priority number one now,
Okay.
village employees. So
Yeah.
there should probably be a survey just for village employees. Correct?
Maybe that's the target audience for for this survey that is employee, maybe that's the first target audience. And then expand.
Yeah.
Okay, something like that, but I just want to make sure that we spend some time on going through these, talking about how do we want to conduct it, through the chamber, not through the chamber, in conjunction with the chamber, something like that, so that we can kind of set some plans for what we want to do. And, I was thinking, I had another comment. Let's see.
So if I could interject just real quickly.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the survey now, there's a question there, do you want to rent, do you want to buy? I think we can do, well, that's part of that discussion. I mean, I don't want to discount what you said, that's not right. So yes, let's do that. What do you want to say, Jay?
I have been led to believe that the North Central Economic Development District is an entity in New Mexico that could help us do a housing needs survey, a new one. I'm not saying that we have to wait on that to make decisions, but I don't have a contact there yet, but I was led to believe that entity, and I may have screwed up the acronym, forgive me, but that entity may be able to help us either do it or find someone to conduct a current housing needs survey.
Okay, so,
That's correct. They did one call.
oh, they did, okay. So if we could get it,
County's pretty good.
is it? Okay. So it'd be good to contact that and take a look at that as well, because if we don't have to reinvent any wheels, I'm perfectly fine with that.
I went to the school.
Okay. So you can get us a contact.
I sent her the office.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, great. So we agree that we're going, I like the idea of seeing this.
But in addition to that, a classmate of mine who is now the chair of planning department at UNM's graduate studies as well.
Okay,
So I asked him at a charrette, who do you guys typically partner with for housing studies? So he was also providing some news as well.
okay,
So we got these two asked, just depending on who can get back to us.
okay. Yeah, so I think, Don, did you want to say something?
And the study has to be done by somebody that we know.
Mhm.
If you all would like it, I have a study that the village paid thousands of dollars for. It reminds me so much of the current marketing proposal. And it had very few facts. And what we needed the facts,
Right,
Right.
incredible facts.
so, okay, so, let me,
You've got personal contact, but I can forward this thing to you on email if you want to see it, but that's clear gibberish.
I don't think outside, I mean, I think the committee here should be able to come up with something that, where we wouldn't need an outside.
mhm. But I think getting,
agency to-
yeah, but I think getting the context and. at
Oh,
least
yeah, yeah.
exploring it
Give
would
us-
be-
Give us references.
Yeah, sure.
Whatever you want to give us, so.
Sure.
Um,
I definitely don't want it to be a marketing. I think we need to be careful about that. We're
I
trying to,
think if you do it right, these are folks that have that specific surveys, analyze the
Right.
surveys,
Mhm.
things of that nature, that it's not the retail marketing
Okay.
fit as well.
okay. All right. So if we could get those contacts ahead of, and have some time to at least maybe have a conversation or at least an example of what they're doing, I think that would be helpful for our work session as well. Do you agree?
Just be careful, some of these folks may be happy to provide service, but not.
Okay, yeah, and that's another consideration, so, okay. Okay, so we're gonna include more on the survey, but please come to that meeting with, and any documents that we can get, you come to that meeting with your ideas of what that should be. You mentioned you wouldn't mind working on the survey. I think bring as many of your thoughts on that as you can. And then we can, that should be, I feel like that should be something that at least we get a definite draft of pretty quickly. And then talk about the game plan for how to conduct that. Okay. All right. Discussion of sourcing a site planner for new site development. So,
So I'm going to jump in here again, and I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt you, but obviously I'm being cryptic. I can't talk too much about the plan, the plan to purchase, because that is on tomorrow's agenda. But one of the things that we're going to need is likely to contract with someone to do site planning out there. That is probably going to involve short-term and long-term goals for the property. We know that there is water and sewer already to the property. How far into the property is an open question. So the process of hiring a site planner, that would be somebody who would obviously interface with you all quite regularly at meetings, because eventually we're going to get to the point where we're deciding on what type of building, how many units, how many bedrooms, those types of things. And all of that is going to then have to get backfed into a site plan for water, for sewer, for internet, for all of the various things to make it buildable. So I would suggest that one of the things that the committee talk about at the next work session is open up to applications for people who would like to contract that work, so that you could then recommend those things up to council for the spend.
yeah, you mentioned, I'm sorry, is somebody on the line want to talk? Oh, okay. So at the last meeting, you mentioned an NGO. Can you just clarify, at least for me, what the NGO stands for?
Non-government organization.
Okay, that was a guess, but I want to make sure.
So
Okay.
Jake, I have a question. This executive session about purchasing this property, are there plans in that discussion of, okay, if you buy this property, this is the budget for a site planner, for example? I mean, we can't ask for site planners if we don't know what the village is willing to.
So yes, there will be a budget. I can tell you that the offer to purchase will be done entirely out of cash, is my understanding.
Okay,
And that one of the questions is going to be, from a design perspective, what density is allowable there. So some of that work is going to be, council is going to come to you with an idea of what we think we want. We may be wrong, that you always want to be proven wrong if somebody has a better idea, right? But ultimately, the site planning will need a budget. That is something that, if the hope would be that this committee is going to be the repository for a bunch of governmental information, surveys about housing needs, And it would be the go-between between council and whoever those potential planners would like to be. So if you know people who do that work that would like to, at this point, I can't give you an idea of the size of the contract. Obviously, we're going to have to pay whatever it costs to make the plan buildable. So, you know, it's going to be a fairly substantial budget by the time this development is all done. Now, how long that takes and how many phases it's in is an open question right now. I don't have the answer to that, but I mean, it's even been talked about. There's some tiny homes sitting over in Eagle Nest. Could we buy a dozen of those, set them and occupy them this summer? I mean, I'm not saying that's a perfect answer. I'm not saying that I would even vote for that answer necessarily, but we know our housing needs for workforce are so dire that we're willing to entertain some very, very quick solutions if we think it's prudent.
Yeah, and the other thing I kind of wanted to mention is not knowing exactly what this particular agenda item was about, but I do think we, as part of this site planning, maybe not specifically that piece of the land, but as we expand to other things, you know, we should consider, if we're going to do some builds, making sure we allow some of the local developers to do the bidding and not just some company from California or, you know, something like that, because the more that we can keep local, I think is good. And then again, we've talked about this. We need to understand what types of units and housing we even want to pursue. That's part of that, but maybe that's not this particular item that you're talking about. This site planner is just for this new development thing, right? Or are we thinking long-term?
I would say I'm speaking specifically about this piece of property that's on tomorrow's agenda, because if we can occupy it and get some temporary housing on there for this year, council is going to be very interested in doing that. It is going to be a longer term development on what the right structures are there 3, 4, 5 years down the road, but we have an opportunity to put up some housing pretty quickly. And if that helps us fill holes within the village or another workforce needs, we're certainly open to doing so. So think of it this way: just as Lodgers Tax Committee will interface with various private contractors or people who build amphitheaters or whatever to get their proposals, we need that type of information flowing through you guys as a committee so that we can act on it. I'll be very specific. There's a site planner sitting in the room with you. His name is Santos. Is Santos the right answer? Does he want the work? Does he want to do more work for the Village of Angel Fire? These are all open questions. Are there other people who would like to do that work? So I think we're looking for you all as a recommendation, and I know we're piling a lot on you right now. I need governments, I need site planning, I need all this, but I look at it as an opportunity. The work that gets done at this committee could very well be the difference between us having workforce housing in 2024 for 0 or 5 or 10 or 20. So we don't want to push you guys to make quick decisions that haven't been well thought out, but we do want to push a little bit to try to get as many people in occupied housing this year as we can.
So I look at this as two parts. We have this property, and Jake mentioned there are current buildings on there to assess. So obviously we want to assess, those, what can be utilized from those existing buildings before we start building some new buildings. And then the other part is, again, if the village employees are a priority, we need to know what do they need.
Right, so we need that service.
So, and then once we have those two, we can figure out how to combine it.
Right.
So I would say first priority of this property is what is on this property that we can currently utilize, or how long would it take? At this point, it's a guess. Are there apartments right now? And they just need to be renovated? Right. We don't know.
On this RD 77 plus 9 village employees, is that with seasonal or is that full-time?
I think that I don't know the answer. Maybe Jake.
We don't have seasonal, do we, with the village? No.
I don't think we have any seasonal employees with the village.
All
at this
full time, or there's some part-time?
Okay, you're looking at 77 full-time.
But the question, if we could get that individual based questionnaire done and get those out to them quickly, then that could at least help us assess what what could be, number one, a temporary solution or, for that property or.
Is that gonna, I mean, what about the villages seasonal people with their work programs, and what about the housing for those people?
You're talking about like for the resort or
resort,
something? I think that is, we talked about if we're expanding out to include all of the workforce, that obviously that would be a subset that would be considered.
Is that still up there with the top tier of the village? No,
No, I think
No,
village
this
is
is
gonna
all
be
just-
first.
Just village, village,
And employer.
full-time
other
employees.
employers. Yeah, okay.
And I guess my biggest question is, okay, 77 plus 9. I'm back to, how many of you actually want to live in Angel Park?
Right, that's,
Yeah,
that's,
yeah.
right.
Because that's really gonna determine kind of the direction we go, so.
What were you-
So we almost need immediate housing for what, 9 people that they're trying to hire full time?
I don't know for sure, but.
I mean, if we went with, he's saying we could do modulars, you can get those up really fast, and then those could be turned into affordable housing for the seasonal people later, where you bring them in, you have a house for them, and then you say, but we're building you this. So you'll be temporarily here, but then the temporary becomes the affordable housing for the local.
I mean, I think that's a good train of thought for us, definitely to
Because then you,
explore.
because he's saying they need immediate physically.
Yeah, so, and I know. Feel like at the last work session, Dawn, you were in the audience and you mentioned something about, maybe it was not you, but maybe it was Jake. Somebody mentioned about, we know we have some employee that we could fill something right away with people that
Maybe something.
is, yeah, something like.
We don't have current information, but
Okay. Mhm.
more than 40% of the workforce in Angel Fire, somewhere around 900,000 people right now for voting. But in case of beer, more than 40% are commuting every day from somewhere outside the valley.
Right, right.
The other thing is there's been discussions of to buy.
Mhm.
The cheapest house for sale in Angel Fire right now is $474,000. It's a 1978 house on a half acre.
Mhm.
If you talk to a builder today, he will look you right in the eye and go $400 a square feet, 2 years from now.
Right, right.
So building and our building probably to show that we're somewhere, but certainly to show we're under 30,000
Mhm. Mhm.
a year.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, so I mean, it's obviously important for us to determine what type of housing that we need. And for the different aspects, different categories of what we need, so that, again, that comes back to that. The study, the housing needs, et cetera, so. Okay, workforce ownership routes, I believe, I mean, you touched upon that already, Santos, it's in our packet.
So if I could interject here again, I-
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Jake, I'm sorry.
I know I mentioned at the last meeting that there were 3 development sites that we were looking at, Plaza del Sol, the Allen Fields area, and then we took a tour of where Mobile Home Estates is. This new piece of property is a 4th, and obviously now it's moving to the top of the list. I really think, and I don't know what the roadblock is, but if you go look at a plot map for Mobile Home Estates, there are several hundred lots out there that don't have roads going to them. Now, to Robbie's point earlier, if there's a downside to Mobile Home Estates, it's that they are in the resort. And I don't mean that as a knock, but it does come with resort dues associated with it. However, to the point of building, if there were 400 site-ready lots to go in Mobile Home Estates right now, I bet they would be filling up with modular or mobile home construction right now. People would start setting those. So one of the things that Santos mentioned earlier is there are some financing options through MFA where if the village runs road, water, sewer, that we could get a portion, some of the housing from a developer going in and doing private development out there. So I have asked the question. I don't know who to ask the question to, but what would it take for the village of Angel Fire to build out the roads, water, and sewer at Mobile Home Estates to even 25% of its lot capacity? Because the road only goes in less than a mile right now and is not fully built out. But is that an option that we could move forward with because of the speed and the price per square foot? And who do we ask that question of development out there?
Yeah, that was,
Yes.
oh, go ahead, Cindy.
Just to follow up with what Jake said, what I can also do is I can email you the plats for mobile home estates. It
Okay.
shows that there might be more than 400 lots on that subdivision already platted, but at least you get a reference point. And it's in a PDF, so I'll send it to the chair.
And I would look at that as an excellent ownership opportunity. If, at some point we're going to put the job out for the police chief, our interim chief is gonna slide over and just do AMS. I don't know how many weeks or months away that is, but somebody who's coming in as a fire chief most likely is going to be a little more senior, is going to have a family. They might be looking for more of an ownership option in that area if it were available. But I cannot for the life of me, through everyone that I've asked, figured out why the road stops where it does out there.
So I think it's good for us to pursue that. One thing, and I kind of pointed out earlier, I want to be really careful that we steer people to just one thing or, and because somebody coming in, the police chief may not want to have a mobile home. He may want to have a permanent resident in a subdivision that is dedicated to workforce housing. So I think that we need to consider a combination of whatever you can do at the mobile home estates to allow people to buy a slot or rent a slot, whatever. I don't know what the rules are out there yet, but do something there, do something that's rental property. And I know the perfect location for rental property before we find out more about this property that we're talking about buying. And then, we really should try to have some sort of subdivision that's dedicated to non-luxury homes that somebody in that kind of maybe the upper end of the median income can afford, but that it can't be, an investor from Amarillo wanting another short-term rental. It's got to be dedicated to long-term rentals or home ownership of the workforce. So I think we need to, like you said, we need to consider multiple routes and.
But we have a main route we have to focus on.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we have one that we're gonna work on. I don't want mobile home estates to be the only other one that we consider, because there's gonna be a subset of people that don't want to do that. I mean, nothing against in the mobile home. There's gonna be.
I'm just concerned with what's being put on our workload here. And I'm one that works, very hard.
Mhm.
We have to come up with governing body or governance documents, definitions. They're buying a piece of property with existing buildings. They want something done ASAP. So I feel like we really need to be real careful of how much we're gonna put on the table.
Right, I agree.
And so I think once we get the governance documents and bylaws and all that done, obviously we need to focus on this
This
piece of
survey.
property that they're buying.
Right, yeah.
So,
But I think the piece of property, just making some decisions about that property, we've got to have some data that's.
I totally agree.
People say, I need a studio, or I only need a studio, or I need a 3-bedroom because I have 6 kids, I mean, we need to understand. So. Did you want to say something?
I'm sure, my apologies, I've burned, but I will say the work that you're doing is beyond noble. It's critical. But I would also share this, don't be surprised that your efforts in focusing on the market of Angel Fire is not such that it just attracts attention from other people, from other places. Just so you know, and you already know this, housing is in a crisis all over the country. And honestly, I think there's a big difference in Angel Fire than Taos. And that Taos just got approval for 49 homes, brand new subdivision across the street from Sid's.
Right.
But it took 2.5 years just to get to a point. They haven't even filed for permit yet. Angel Fire has a lot more, I believe, assets as far as flat lands, public infrastructure than you'll find in Taos Ski Valley and Red River. And I think we actually have more water rights than Eagle Nest. So I wouldn't be surprised if the work you do starts to evolve to where folks will say, well, why do I want to live in Taos when I can just live in Angel Fire and do the reverse trip.
Sure.
I think that's the type of work you'll probably end up leading towards, which is fantastic. But again, the focus that you've got right now, I think is a really good focus, but just don't be surprised if you start getting other interest from other areas.
Sure.
And the other thing, there's a lot of homes that were destroyed in that fire in Mora. There are families that don't want to leave the area, but would like, so maybe when we did this survey, nobody wanted to move. But now with all the backlogs from FEMA, people still looking for a place to live.
Right.
That there are going to be other markets that might be attractive to Angel Fire that we hadn't considered before, just because the dynamics have changed.
And I think that goes somewhere on the priority list, but not at the top.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand. I just think as you start moving along, some of these other factors will start coming in off the margins, and I think that's fine. But I think the work you're doing is gonna demonstrate the strength of the work that you are doing.
Okay, all right, great.
Thank you for
Thank
being here.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, so, yeah, the workforce housing ownership route, I do think we do need to discuss that, but it's not the immediate priority. Does everybody agree with that? Does anybody have a different thought? No? Okay. Because obviously the council is kind of putting something ahead of,
Yeah.
in front of us that we need to go for, so.
I think looking at, look for the dignity of people who are in working here, you want to say, yes, we want to give you a path to home ownership. We give you, a path to what you would like. Some people like, may want to be in a manufactured home and be happy with that. Other people be like, yeah, I want a townhome or want this or that. So how can we do that? But I think we've got clear, we're saying the buckets, I put in the notes, or tiers. We've got a tier 1, that's our focus right now.
Village.
And then we can expand the pyramid.
Yeah.
And build out tiers. Yeah, I absolutely.
agree. I think that's good. Okay.
And is Jake still there? Jake,
Yes, I'm here.
when so let's say everything gets approved, when will we actually find out about this property and what's on it?
Hopefully this week. It depends on the back and forth in the contract negotiations, but I would expect if not this week, I'd feel pretty confident before your work session.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay.
And one of the questions you guys did ask, because there are existing structures on site, part of this offer is being written with what would need to be done in mind. And so the council is cognizant that, we're not going to hand you a, hey, go do all this work to figure out how to turn this existing structure into apartments or into housing or whatever. We will know a little bit more of that, and we'll be happy to share it with you. I'd like to share it now, but again, with the executive session forthcoming tomorrow, hopefully we have good news shortly.
So let me ask a quick question. So with what we have in front of us, which is which is Angel Fire Village employee housing needs. We have said that there's sort of 2 entities that need to be surveyed. One are the employees, so that we know, okay, what's your family like? That's going to take some time. We'll do that at the work session in 2 weeks. The other one, though, is the employer, which is the village. And Jake, is there information you can just plan on getting to us before next week or before our next meeting about what the village thinks exactly how many employees, as far as it knows, you need housing for it, or are we not?
So I can ask the question. Obviously, we're getting into, that some people's information, private information. So let me get with Manager Weir and see if we can anonymize that data and figure out how many employees we have living where now. And then as far as asking where they'd like to live, that would be, kind of the next question. But I think we ought to be able to at least get you the data of where do our 77 current employees currently reside?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not by address, but by, nearest township.
Okay, that'd be good. Okay. Anything, I think we've gone through the entire agenda. Did anybody have anything else? I guess we're supposed to declare if we have new business, but anything else that we need to do?
Do we need to set the next agenda? I guess if it's just, if we're gonna have this work session, we don't.
I feel like
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like the agenda would evolve over the next couple, we probably have a deadline that we need to get that done by, and I'll confirm with the new clerk on when that's supposed to be sent out. I'll make sure we get information from everybody via email on what the next agenda will be.
And I think it's gonna be determined by what all is.
What happens tomorrow, yeah.
Well, that, no, but what all is coming to us,
Right.
Santos,
Sure.
info,
Right.
whoever, because we might get flooded here with
Yeah.
Says it's just gonna be compiling.
filing.
The only thing I would know, you guys know better than I, but I think usually best practice is to like set what you're gonna talk about before the next meeting, so it's public. Available, but
Right, and so I think between now and whatever the deadline is for the,
Oh, you're saying now?
I think that's normally is with the end of one meeting, you say, okay, what are agenda items?
I'd say number one is we need to define workforce.
that's for the work session you're talking about?
That's for the work session. We have to have a public agenda for the work session, correct?
I think we
That is
do.
correct. You do, and that has to be published, I think it's 72 hours in advance, so you would need to set the agenda, I believe, Thursday of the week prior. So then I think that agenda is going to be based on how much information, all the committee members gather up that we've talked about. What does Ruidoso have? What does Red River have? What's the village employee location? Like, there's going to be a lot of data coming in to you all between now and then to digest and hopefully sit down and talk about to form next steps.
Yeah, and I feel like maybe that, I understand that it'd be nice for us to have our complete agenda set tonight, but I really do think maybe part of it is we say, we're gonna review the information, we're gonna agree on a definition of workforce, and we're gonna work through the survey. Is kind of that, is that kind of what you're
That
looking
sounds
for?
good to me.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
when I've sat on other committees, you have to be careful about, like, we can't set the agenda via email with private.
Sure.
We need to set the
Yeah.
agenda here in
Oh,
public. for the
okay.
next meeting.
Okay. So we said, what did we just say? I rattled.
Yeah, just so, whatever you said makes sense.
Workforce.
Yeah, we're gonna review the documentation, discuss the examples that we receive from other entities,
Bylaws and governance.
bylaws and governance documents, then we'll kind of determine our definition of the workforce housing. And then we will do the work, we'll have our work session to work on the surveys that we need.
And then we'll know about this land.
And yeah, and then let's discuss the new
What the game plan is.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could put that in grade words, because I'm kind of struggling for the words. Meg, we're looking for.
So
Yes.
all of us were on emails today, right? You're getting
Everybody got,
emails?
yes, okay, okay.
So we just keep continuing with that group,
Mhm,
Okay.
sure, and we copy Jake
and copy paste.
as our liaison, okay. So, and then just to make sure that of the follow-up, so Santos was gonna send us quite a few documents. I agreed I was gonna ask BJ a couple of questions. One was how to go about getting a site planner. That was one of the things that I know Santos is site planner, but I have no idea who other options would be. Yeah, okay. You were going to review the Taos info.
Contact somebody.
Okay. Matt, did you volunteer?
I didn't have any homework.
Okay.
I'm Red River.
You're Red River and,
I didn't have any homework either.
okay.
No, I didn't.
So. Okay, so Taos and Red River is what we're gonna focus on. Don, you thought maybe you could provide us with did you say you could add a contact for Red River, or did we get a contact?
That was something.
Okay, so
I'll get
okay. Okay,
I agree with Don, by the way, for what it's worth, that I do think Red Rivers, but
Yeah.
I agree too. It's,
Yeah.
yeah,
unless there's something in Colorado.
right. And then the minutes, would you mind, do you have a date that we could get the minutes by, maybe like by Friday?
Yeah.
Okay, or any earlier?
Friday,
than that?
yeah.
Okay, that'd be great.
Friday is latest, yeah.
Okay. Then we can distribute. and I'm assuming it's okay, Jake, that she distributes the minute out for us to read this Friday. We don't have to do any, and then we just have to approve them next time, right?
That's correct.
Oh, we better put approval of the minutes on our agenda as well. Okay. Okay. All
My
right.
apologies for not being able to be there in person. I wanted to be, but my appointments for today and tomorrow were made 6 months ago, and if I'd canceled them, it's going to be another 6 months. So
Yeah.
sorry for not being there in person.
Okay, one other follow-up item. You mentioned some training for Meg.
Yes.
So can you get together with him and,
Yeah, I just spoke to Manager Weir about that. Hopefully we're gonna try to schedule it to where all of the people like Meg on the other committees, that we can try to do as many of them at once as possible. Identify a laptop for them to use, show them how to use the cameras, all of that. And that way, all the committees will be self-sufficient at that point, but I don't have a date on it yet. I will add it to my list of things to find out.
okay, okay. Anything else? Any other follow-up items that missed? Anything else from the audience? No? Okay. Okay, well, then I'll say meeting adjourned. Right, and I think Santos is gonna send